Hey everyone, I want to talk today a little bit about inconvenient faith. Uh, Usually there are two types of people: those who believe they should have faith and value faith but don't have it, or those who have faith despite anything that happens in their lives, or their upbringing, or the circumstances that they find their reasoning in, their logical processes. Despite all that, some have faith regardless of even what they want to believe. That's the second type I'm talking about. The first type is those who value faith but don't have it. So there's two main types. Um, Now, I consider myself of the second type. I wasn't raised with any idea of God or faith. In fact, when I heard it from other children, I had to look up the definition for all the religions because I did not and was not raised with any religious background at all. I didn't ask my parents these things. And the funny thing is, it wasn't because I didn't wonder about if there was a God, if there was a way to reach God. It was that I did not think that they knew. Um, I did not think that my parents knew because they never mentioned anything like a God. And even as a child of 8 years old, I thought this and decided to research it on my own. I looked up the definitions for all the religions, and I looked and see to see if any of them made sense to me. And the one that popped out to me was Buddhism first. Buddhism, its basic definition is end to suffering and a realization of the impurity of the discrimination the average man has. Uh, that there is a nothingness and peace in nothingness beyond all the cravings and aversions that compose our personality. And when I saw a definition that there was a way to end suffering, and I myself was suffering, and this should have been the first time I realized I was suffering when I was 8 years old. But the religion Buddhism that stated that it desired to end the suffering for oneself and everyone else, that stood out to me. That made me think I can actually stop suffering. Now you may ask, why did I feel like I was suffering at 8 years old? Barely, maybe in second grade. Um, I've always had schizophrenia, of course, but I've always had major depressive disorder as a result of schizophrenia. And I was depressed at the time. I didn't realize that I was, and I didn't realize why I chose to pursue a path that sought to end suffering for oneself and others. But nonetheless, I pursued it. Um, and it's funny, Buddhism, out of all the religions, has the least mention of God or idea of God. Now, I'm a Hindu now, and us Hindus believe that uh, Buddha believed a little bit differently than what is recorded. Uh, all of his beliefs written down at least 300 years after his death. But despite that, putting that aside, um, the idea of God always had a certain truth about it for me, even though I had not been introduced to God and I had not introduced myself for my childhood, basically all of my childhood. Only the teen years was the idea of God prevalent and possible in my mind. Um, Now, what's interesting about what I experienced when I was 8 years old, and I looked up the definition for all the religions, uh, I remember ducking my head back on the computer chair and thinking, is there something beyond myself? Is there a God? Maybe not in those words, but very similar feeling. And I just felt something beyond myself. Um, Whether this something could be described as a feeling of God, uh, back then when I was 8 years old, I don't know. The feeling that I remember is not that specific, but I felt something beyond myself. And something that I still do is when I look up at the ceiling, all these little ink blots that we see on the ceiling, very simple. All these little ink blots. I just think that there are more galaxies in this universe than there are ink blots on my ceiling, which is amazing to me. because all the galaxies have many millions of stars and millions of planets, even more millions of planets, revolving around those stars, and they're all revolving in a galaxy, whether it be a spiral galaxy or any other kind of galaxy. They kind of slip my mind now, but no matter what kind of galaxy it is, there's just so many stars and planets, and there's just such a majesty to the universe that makes one feel very small. Um, but the feeling that I felt, the feeling that there is something beyond myself, is something that still exists within me. It's been more refined, and I've looked into all different religions, all the major religions, and many of the ones that are not major. Also true, different kinds of pagan, Vodou, the remnants of the African religion. Um, and I have a very good blueprint of what I believe, but I can't really be called orthodox anything. Basically, the only thing I can be called is Hindu because Hinduism is very non-rigid, undogmatic, more spiritual. There are dogmatic and religious Hindus who think everybody else is going to hell. You'll find that in any religion, but in Hinduism, as far as the texts go, it's very loose. It's very adaptable. It's the way it's lasted for so long. It's the oldest surviving religion on the earth as far as archaeology is concerned. Of course, we Hindus kind of think it's a little bit older, just a little. And the reason I chose Hinduism is not necessarily so much that it's the oldest religion or it's vague or loose or you can add things onto it, though those are true. The reason I chose it is that there's always been a feeling in me that God has a side that one could call mother. Now, that's the main reason I chose it. There are a few other small reasons, but the idea of the Divine Mother, that part of God that was first split from God, the very first thing that was split from God before everything else was created, as in Hinduism, everything's a part of God ultimately, just to lesser or greater degrees. But I've always felt that I was always more drawn to the motherly aspect of the universe. The Divine Mother, which all her children can look up to and feel the warmth of no matter where they are. All the children in the universe can ask for mercy and get it from the Divine Mother. Now, there are many different goddesses called Mother or Divine Mother in Hinduism and in other religions. But in Hinduism, it's a personal mother. It's one that is close to you. It's one that nurtures you. It's one that wants you to succeed and will get you to eat your vegetables even if you don't want to. I don't want to go into my specific version of the Divine Mother that I recognize and worship God through, which is Kali Ma. I'll get into that in another video, but the idea of the Divine Mother is very appealing to me and has been appealing to many people throughout the world. The idea that God has a motherly side and that we can look up to that side for comfort, understanding, and nurturing from the divine aspect, not just our earthly mother, which our earthly mother is a conduit for the Divine Mother, of course. Same with Father. The Divine Father is conducted through our fathers as well as through other energetic forms. But anyway, I just wanted to say that the faith that I found is not really a choice. That might sound strange. You can choose whatever religion you're in, especially in the United States of America. But I have examined so much and brought myself to understand quite a bit to the point where my logic, even my compassion, is convinced that what I believe, being Hindu, but this is true for many other people as well that aren't Hindu, that this blueprint, which I can add additions onto, is right. Um, it's something that I can't just toss aside. And even if I told people that I don't believe in Hindu beliefs, if I told people that I'm a different religion just out of convenience or because I didn't want to explain Hindu beliefs, or if I told myself every day I don't believe this, God doesn't really exist. I mean, where is he? I mean, is he tangible? Where can you see him? There's just no reason to believe in a God. Even if I said that, even if I acted like I was atheist, that's not what I would believe. That's not what I believe, and it's inconvenient. It feels like I don't have a choice because I truly am convinced of my beliefs. Uh, Many people might find this comforting and warm to be so convicted in one's system of understanding of the universe. But I say it's inconvenient because I simply don't have a choice. This is who I am, what I understand, and where I see myself always being. Um, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Inconvenient faith is not a bad thing. It's just I don't feel like I have a choice in it. I feel like this is who I am, and this is what I believe, and this is the truth. And choice just isn't a part of it because I'm convinced. And it's just, I could say it as simply as if you know that 3 plus 3 equals 6, no matter how much you tell yourself that it's 4 or 5, you know it's 6. And that's exactly how I feel. And that's all I wanted to say about inconvenient faith. It's not a negative feeling. It's not a positive feeling either, honestly. It's just what is. That's the feeling that I have. This is what is, whether I like it or not. And honestly, I hope everybody learns enough, researches enough, science and mathematics, and all the religions as well, and all spiritual ideas as much as I have, so that you can get to a place to where you are convinced a certain way, and you basically don't have a choice because you have all the knowledge. At least all the knowledge that is required to form a belief system. And if you have that much knowledge to where you basically can say how everything works in a vague understanding or sense of the term, how everything works, then you will be convinced of something. You will be convinced of a certain line of reasoning, whether it be purely scientific, purely religious, purely spiritual, or a combination of all three. You will be convinced of something the more knowledge you soak up, the more knowledge you go after, the more knowledge you seek. And get to that point to where you have looked into every avenue, at least a good amount, that you come to a solution that is unavoidable. And I recommend that for everyone. Open your mind to whatever you find and look everywhere. See what happens. And that's Inconvenient Faith.